Hello everyone and happy Mothering Sunday, also known as Mother's Day. Today we will be exploring together the story of Hannah and Samuel. So our story today is called Hannah's Promise. This story is about a woman named Hannah who really wanted to have a child. Every year she would go with her husband to a place called Shiloh. While they were there would be a big festival and everyone would celebrate all that God did for them. They would thank God for their crops and everything God gave them, and gave sacrifices or presents to God to show how thankful they were. This sometimes made Hannah very sad because she wanted so badly to be thankful, but was discouraged because she couldn't have a child. That didn't mean Hannah moped around and felt sorry for herself, but in her heart she was very sad. Her husband still loved her very much and tried to make her feel better, but nothing seemed to work. Finally, Hannah did the only thing she knew that she could do to help her situation. One evening, when they had finished eating and drinking, Hannah went to the temple and began to pray. When Hannah prayed, she was very honest with how she was feeling. She sometimes cried a lot and probably felt like God had forgotten her. But while she was praying, she promised God, "Dear God, if you would only look and see how sad I am and remember me, please give me a son. If you would do that for me, I will dedicate my son to you for his whole life." As Hannah was praying, there was a man named Eli, a priest, who was sitting nearby and saw her. While Hannah was praying, she was praying to herself. Her lips were moving, but Eli couldn't hear her say anything. We can pray just like this too if we need to. We can pray to God in our head so no one can hear. Eli realised that Hannah was being very honest and truthful with God, and he said to her, "Go in peace and may God answer your prayer." After that, Hannah left. She felt much better because she had talked to God about what bothered her. Early the next morning, she even went to worship God before she went home. You see, sometimes God doesn't answer our prayers, but we can't just be mad forever and not talk or thank God for all the other good things in our life. God knows what's best, so there's always a good reason why He hasn't answered your prayer. But a while later, a great thing happened. God, of course, remembered Hannah because God doesn't forget any of us, and gave her a son, and she named him Samuel. Hannah had waited so long for this child, and she loved him so much, but she remembered that she made a promise to God. Hannah was an honest woman, and when she made a promise, she meant it. Again, Hannah had a good attitude and wanted to give Samuel back to God. She wasn't mad at herself and changed her mind. Hannah kept her promise. When Samuel was old enough, she went back to the place where she had prayed and said to Eli the priest, "Do you remember me? I am the woman that cried and prayed for this child, and he answered my prayer. Now I give him to the Lord, and I will leave him with you to learn and work with you." So Samuel lived with Eli, and every year Hannah would pack her suitcase and visit him and bring him new clothes. It might have been hard for Hannah to see Samuel only once a year, but she wanted to keep her promise. God blessed Hannah again and gave her and her husband even more sons and daughters. So Samuel was very young when his mother brought him to the temple. He probably was given simple tasks to begin with, such as fetching and carrying things for Eli the high priest. It didn't really matter what Samuel was doing, because everything he did in his life was for God. We can serve God with our whole lives too. We can choose to live for God, listening to His voice, sharing His love with others, and offering our lives to Him in worship. Now, what did you get your mum for Mother's Day? I got my mum a mug and some chocolates and a painting by numbers. And I asked her, "What is your favourite thing about looking after me?" And she said to me, My favourite thing about looking after you is to make sure that you are always happy, and you give me lots of and she gives me lots of good things to eat and keep my tummy full. Isn't that a nice thing to say? Now, an active prayer. In the story, Hannah prayed to God in her heart without making a sound, but her lips were moving. There are so many ways that we can pray and talk to God. Why not try each of these different ways to pray? Mouth a prayer like Hannah. Remember, God can't hear us even when we don't speak. God can hear us even when we don't speak out loud. Draw a picture of your prayer to God. Pray with your whole body. Dance or act out what you want to say to God. Pray as loudly as possible. Write out your prayers to God. Place a hand on a family member and pray for them. Hannah was committed to her family and her promises to God. Why not make a promise to God today that you can keep as a family this week? Perhaps you could commit to ending each day with prayer or to listening to worship music at breakfast time. Now, a prayer to say together to end with. Dear God, thank you for the story of Hannah, who dedicated her son Samuel to serving in the temple. Thank you that when Hannah called out in prayer, that you heard her. Help us to be dedicated in our own prayer lives, trusting that you hear us and love us. We thank you for all those who are mothers in our own lives, helping us to grow in our faith and relationship with God. Amen. Now, I hope that you have spoiled your mums and dads very well on Mother's Day, and I will see you next week with another story.